The coffee maker in Margaret Calloway's kitchen made the same sound every morning at 5:47, a low, asthmatic gurgle, followed by three sharp hisses, like something trying to clear its throat and failing. Shed meant to replace it for 6 years. She hadn't. She stood at the counter in her bathrobe with both hands flat against the cold laminate, watching the dark liquid fill the carafe, and she counted the seconds the way she always did, the way Shed always done everything in this house. Quietly, precisely, without being asked, outside. Cincinnati was still dark, October dark. The kind that had weight to it. The maple in the backyard had gone fully red in the last week, and she could see it through the sliding glass door, just barely, pressing itself against the gray sky like a bruise. She poured the coffee, black, travel mug, the green one with the dented side that had been rolling around in her minivan since her daughter's last soccer season, 3 years before Rebecca moved to Portland and stopped calling on Sundays. She had 30 minutes before she needed to start on the HOA budget report that Gary had emailed her at 11:42 the previous night with no subject line, just a spreadsheet attachment and 3 words. When you can. She pulled out the laptop, opened the spreadsheet. The numbers sat in their cells, clean and waiting. Margaret Calloway had a master's degree in investigative journalism from Northwestern. She had once spent 4 months embedded with a water rights legal team in rural Arizona, filing stories that ran above the fold. She had, at the age of 29, been named one of the Cincinnati Enquirer's most promising staff writers by an editor who told her she had the instincts of someone who's been doing this for decades. She typed Gary's numbers into the column marked Q4 discretionary. She was very good at spreadsheets now. Her husband Dennis came downstairs at 6:15, already dressed for the office. He moved through the kitchen the way he always did, efficiently, without acknowledgement of anyone already in it. He opened the refrigerator, closed it, opened the cabinet where the protein powder lived. "You finished the Milner account?" he said. Not to her exactly, more toward the general direction of the room. "I sent you the summary Thursday." He was reading something on his phone. "Gary needs the HOA thing. I'm doing it now. Good." He measured a scoop of powder. "Client dinner tonight, Morton's downtown, 7:30. He paused, then added without looking up, "You don't need to come. It's just, it's work people. You'd be background noise, background noise." He said it the way you'd say it might rain or pick up milk. A fact, a weather pattern, a thing that simply was. She did not move. Her hands stayed flat on the keyboard. The green travel mug steamed gently between them. "Okay," she said. He left at 6:23. The garage door opened and closed. The house settled back into its particular silence. The tick of the baseboard heater, the maple branch scraping the gutter, the refrigerator's low, continuous hum. Margaret sat very still. Background noise. Shed heard variations of it for years. "You don't have to worry about that. Leave the business talk to me. Nobody needs your opinion on this, Maggie. But this one, this particular arrangement of 2 words, landed somewhere below her sternum and stayed there, like a stone dropped in still water. Not sinking, just there, suspended. She closed the HOA spreadsheet. She didn't open it again. Her neighbor's daughter, Caitlin, 19, home from Ohio State for fall break, was coming up the driveway when Margaret went to get the mail at 8. The girl had earbuds in and almost walked past her, then stopped, pulled one out. "Mrs. Calloway," she hesitated. Her eyes moved to the door where Dennis Carr had been an hour before, then back. "I was going to knock. I wanted to return your casserole dish from whenever." "No rush," Margaret said. Caitlin didn't move. She had that particular stillness of someone who has overheard something they were not meant to hear and cannot unknow it. The window above the kitchen sink looked directly onto the driveway. Margaret understood this. She had always understood this. "Are you okay?" Caitlin asked, young enough to still ask that directly. Still believing the answer might be the truth, Margaret smiled. It was a complete smile, practiced, warm, entirely sealed. "Of course," she said. "Tell your mother I'll bring the dish back Thursday." She went back inside. She stood in the kitchen for a long moment, the mail in one hand, a water bill, a Kohl's circular, something from AARP she hadn't opened, and she looked at the house around her. The framed prints Dennis had chosen, the sectional Dennis had picked, the tile backsplash Shed suggested once, and had looked at briefly and said, "I don't think that's really us." Maggie and she had said nothing, and the contractor had installed the beige one the following Tuesday. Background noise. She walked to the window and stood there, watching Caitlin cross back toward her own house, earbuds back in, not looking back. The maple bled red against the gray sky. Somewhere inside her, very quietly, in a room she hadn't opened in a long time, something shifted. Before we go any further, I have to stop for just a second. If Margaret's morning felt familiar to you, if you recognize something in that kitchen, in that smile, in that word, background noise, I want you to do one thing right now. Hit subscribe. This channel is built for women who've been told to stay quiet, and I need you in this community. And leave me a comment. Tell me where you're watching from, how old you are, and what time it is where you are right now. I read every single one. Every single one. It takes 5 seconds. And you have no idea how much it means. Now, back to Margaret. She found it by accident. She wasn't looking for it. She was looking for the box of Rebecca's old school photos that Shed promised to mail. Promised twice now, actually. And Shed gone up to the attic the way she always did, bracing on the pull-down stair rail, the plywood floor cold even through her socks. The attic smelled of fiberglass and old cardboard and something faintly chemical. The dried residue of a roof patch Dennis had done himself the summer before last and declared finished before it was. She found Rebecca's box, set it by the stairs, and then she saw the other one. Banker's box, brown, the kind with a lid that pressed on instead of folding, her handwriting on the side in black Sharpie from a long time ago, the handwriting Shed had before she stopped writing anything worth noting. Margaret Hadley. Northwestern Inquirer, Field Files Hadley. Her name before. She stared at it for a moment without touching it. Then she heard her phone buzz in her pocket. She pulled it out. A news alert. Local. Cincinnati Journalism Excellence Awards. Annual gala announced for November 14th. And below the headline, a photograph of the evening's keynote speaker, newly announced, freshly returned from a decade overseas. Daniel Reeves, Pulitzer Prize recipient, former foreign correspondent, coming home. Margaret looked at the name for a long time. Daniel Reeves, 28 years. She set the phone face down on the plywood floor. She put both hands on the banker's box. And she lifted the lid. The box smelled like paper and time. Not dusty exactly. More like the particular stillness of air that hasn't been disturbed in years. Cool and faintly sweet, the way old newsprint gets when it's been sealed somewhere dark. Margaret sat cross-legged on the attic floor with the lid beside her and looked at what Shed packed away sometime in the winter of 1997, in a different apartment, in a different version of her life. Her press badge was on top. Cincinnati Inquirer, Margaret Hadley, staff writer. The photo was terrible. Shed blinked slightly, and her hair was still damp from the rain Shed walked through to get to the building that morning. She remembered the morning. She remembered the way the badge felt when she clipped it to her coat, like being handed something Shed already earned. She set it aside. Beneath it, 3 spiral notebooks, college-ruled, filled edge to edge with her handwriting, field notes, source quotes. The shorthand Shed developed in her second year at Northwestern that looked like a foreign language and was, in its way, a private one, spoken only by the version of her that had believed she was going somewhere. Beneath the notebooks, a manila folder. Inside the folder, a printout of an email chain. She knew what it was before she opened it. She opened it anyway. It was from Daniel, March 3rd, 1996. The last one in the chain. Shed printed it. She couldn't remember why. It was the kind of thing you did then, when email still felt impermanent, when you printed the things you wanted to be real.
Maggie, I got the AP offer.
It's Nairobi. It's 2 years, maybe 3. I know the timing is, I know. But I keep thinking about what you said at Thurman's, about how a story has to cost you something to be worth telling. I think this is mine. I think it might be ours if you... The sentence stopped there. She remembered finishing it. She remembered sitting at the desk in her apartment on Clifton Avenue, the radiator clanking beside her, the smell of her upstairs neighbors cooking drifting through the ceiling, and reading that last word, if you, and feeling the full weight of what it was asking. She also remembered what happened 3 weeks later. Dennis Calloway, who she'd been seeing for 8 months, who was steady and certain, and already talking about a house in Hyde Park, who had looked at her across a restaurant table one evening and said, "I want to build something with you, Maggie. Something real." Dennis, who had a plan and a timeline and a 5-year vision, and who had never once, not once, made her feel like she was standing at the edge of something terrifying and magnificent at the same time. Dennis, who she had chosen. She folded the email back into the folder. The trade had felt reasonable then. That was the part no one told you. that the trades that cost you everything feel at the moment of making them like the sensible option, like the adult thing, like you are finally, blessedly done with the exhausting business of wanting too much. She had not known, could not have known, that Dennis' plan had room for a house and a timeline, and a 5-year vision, and a wife who handled the things that didn't require his attention. She had not known that building something together meant she would pour herself into the foundation, and he would put his name on the door. She had not known that she would become, in his vocabulary, background noise. She sat in the attic for a long time, the fiberglass insulation pressed pink and silent around her. Far below, the baseboard heater ticked. Then she picked up the press badge, held it in her palm, and looked at the woman in the photograph. The woman who had walked through rain to get somewhere she believed she belonged. She was downstairs by noon. She made no announcement. She told no one. She simply opened her personal laptop. Not the shared household one, the older one she used for things Dennis considered her hobbies. And she searched for the contact page of the Cincinnati Enquirer. The masthead had changed completely, names she didn't recognize, a new design, a podcast now, apparently, but there, third from the bottom, a name she almost recognized. Loretta Vance, deputy features editor. She'd been a summer intern, Margaret was almost certain, sometime around 2001. Young, eager, carried a voice recorder the size of a brick. Margaret opened a new email. She stared at the blank subject line for 40 seconds. Then she typed, "Long overdue introduction," and a proposal. She did not explain herself in the body of the email. She simply listed, in 4 clean sentences, who she had been: Northwestern, the Enquirer, the Arizona Water Rights Series, 2 regional press awards, and what she was prepared to do now. She attached a writing sample she had, until this morning, considered permanently retired. She hit send before she could decide not to. Then she closed the laptop, stood up, and started making lunch. Her hands were completely steady. Dennis came home at 9:30. He smelled of Morton's, steak and cigar smoke, and the particular cologne he wore only when he wanted to be taken seriously by men who wore similar cologne. He was in a good mood, which meant the dinner had gone well, which meant someone had listened to him for 3 hours and agreed with most of it. He came into the kitchen where she was reading at the counter. A habit had always found vaguely irritating, her reading in rooms he was about to enter, and he loosened his tie and opened the refrigerator. "Good night," she said. "Great night." He pulled out the leftover pasta shed made Tuesday. Milner signed the extended contract. 2 years? He looked at the pasta. "This still good?" "It's fine." He put it in the microwave, leaned against the counter across from her. He had that expansive quality he got after a good dinner, almost generous, almost warm, like a man who has just remembered he enjoys the general concept of his life. "What'd you do today?" Margaret turned a page. "Attic," she said. "Some organizing. Good." The microwave beeped. He didn't ask anything further. He didn't look up from his phone. He ate standing at the counter, scrolling, chewing, entirely comfortable in the assumption that the world was operating correctly and that his role in it was central and confirmed. He went upstairs at 10. At 10:14, Margaret's phone buzzed on the counter. She looked at it. Loretta Vance, deputy features editor, Cincinnati Enquirer. A reply already she hadn't expected until tomorrow at the earliest. "Maybe not at all." She opened it. "Margaret, I actually know exactly who you are. I've been the one pulling your old Arizona series as a training example for new hires for 4 years. We need to talk. Are you free tomorrow morning?" Margaret read it twice. Then she set the phone down on the counter. "Face up this time." Through the sliding glass door, the maple stood in the dark backyard, stripped now of half its leaves by an evening wind she hadn't heard. What remained glowed faintly, even in the dark. She thought about Daniel's email, the last sentence. "I think it might be ours. If you... 28 years." She thought about a gala on November 14th. 12 days away, she thought about a banker's box in the attic and a press badge, and a woman who had walked through rain to get to something she believed she deserved. Then she picked up the phone and typed back to Loretta Vance. "Tomorrow, 9 o'clock, I'll bring the rest of the work." She slept better than she had in years. She did not know why exactly. The house was the same, the baseboard heater ticked through the same dark hours. Dennis breathed beside her with the steady confidence of a man with no outstanding questions. But somewhere in her chest, something that had been sealed for a very long time was beginning, quietly and without drama, to unseal.
Stood outside in the October dark.
And Margaret Calloway, who had once been Margaret Hadley, who had once walked through rain to get somewhere she believed she belonged, lay in the dark and stared at the ceiling, and made a list. Loretta Vance was younger than Margaret had imagined, and older than she looked. 37, maybe 38, the kind of woman who had gotten somewhere early and spent the years since making sure it stuck. She had a glass-walled office on the third floor of the Inquirer building on Elm Street that smelled of printer ink and cold brew coffee, and the particular energy of a newsroom that still believed in itself despite everything the industry had done to discourage that belief. She stood when Margaret walked in. Not the polite half-rise of someone being professional. She stood fully, completely, the way you stand when someone walks into a room and you want them to understand immediately that you know exactly who they are. "I pulled the Arizona series again this morning," Loretta said, "before hello, before sit down, before anything. The third piece. The one about the woman who lost her well rights and had to buy her own water back from the municipality." She paused. "I've assigned that piece to 11 different writers as a model over 4 years, and not one of them has gotten within 10 feet of what you did in the opening 3 paragraphs. Margaret set her folder on the desk. "I've been out of it for a while," she said. "I know." Loretta sat, gestured to the chair across. "Tell me why you're back." It was a direct question, a journalist's question, the kind that doesn't offer you a comfortable place to land if you decide to be vague. Margaret opened the folder. "I have 6 pieces," she said. "Fully drafted. 2 of them are ready to publish now. The other 4 need 2 weeks of additional reporting." She slid the folder across the desk. "I want a contributing contract. Byline. No editorial interference on the Arizona-style long-form. And I need press credentials for the Journalism Excellence Gala on November 14th. Loretta looked at her. "That's very specific." "Yes." A beat passed. Loretta opened the folder, read the first page of the first piece, then the second. She didn't look up for 4 minutes. In the newsroom beyond the glass, phones rang and keyboards clattered, and someone laughed too loudly near the coffee station, and none of it touched the quiet inside the office. Loretta closed the folder. "The credentials aren't a problem," she said. "The contract isn't a problem," she leaned back. "The byline. You want Hadley or Calloway?" Margaret hadn't expected the question. It landed somewhere in her throat. "Hadley," she said. The word came out without hesitation, which told her something she needed to know. Loretta nodded once, as if this was correct and she'd known it would be. "Welcome back, Margaret." The next 11 days were the cleanest she had felt in years. She worked mornings at the kitchen counter before Dennis came downstairs, the good laptop open, the green travel mug steaming beside it. She worked afternoons at the library on Maximilian, a high-ceilinged Carnegie building that smelled of old binding glue and radiator heat, where the librarian, a quiet man named Arthur who wore the same cardigan 3 days a week and never asked unnecessary questions, had given her the corner table by the window without being asked after the 3rd day. She made calls, sources she hadn't spoken to in decades who answered anyway, because people who have given you something true once will generally give you something true again. She filed her first piece on a Tuesday. Loretta sent back edits, minor, precise, respectful, and they went back and forth twice before it was done. It ran online Thursday with her byline, "Margaret Hadley, contributing writer." She read it on her phone in the library parking lot, sitting in the minivan with the engine off, the October cold beginning to press through the glass. She read it once, then she put the phone in her bag and sat for a moment with both hands in her lap. She did not cry, that wasn't where she kept things like this. But she breathed differently on the drive home. Deeper, like a door inside her rib cage had been opened an inch. She did not tell Dennis. He did not ask. This was, she understood, the architecture of the life they had built. A structure so accustomed to her silence that it registered her noise only as disruption. She moved through the house, made the dinners, attended the HOA meeting on the 9th, transferred funds between accounts, and Dennis moved through the same house beside her, entirely confident that the instrument of their domestic life was playing its usual notes. It was on the 11th that he mentioned the gala. He came downstairs that morning already dressed, a good suit, the charcoal one, and said, while pouring coffee, "The Journalism Excellence thing is next week." Thursday, Margaret looked up from her laptop. "Closed it slowly, I know," she said. "Milner's firm is sponsoring the very important person reception." He straightened his cufflink. "I'll be at the head table." "Good exposure." He glanced at her. "You don't need to come, it's..." you know, industry people, you'd just be sitting there. She looked at him for a moment. Okay, she said. He left at 6:18. She opened the laptop. The dress was at the back of the closet in the guest room. Shed bought it 4 years ago for a friend's retirement dinner and worn it once and then moved it there when she reorganized the main closet into a more efficient system that Dennis preferred, navy silk, structured at the shoulder, the kind of garment that asked something of the person wearing it. She put it on the morning of the 14th, standing in the guest room with the door closed, and looked at herself in the full-length mirror that had been in this room since Rebecca was in middle school, and had the sticker residue on the bottom left corner to prove it. She looked for a long time, not at the dress, at the woman in the dress. She had her mother's posture, straight and unapologetic. She had the jaw of someone who had spent years deciding not to say things. Her hair was longer than it had been at the Inquirer, silver now at the temples in a way she had once worried about and had at some point simply stopped worrying about. She looked like someone who had been somewhere and come back. She picked up the press badge, the new one, the one Loretta's assistant had messengered to the house 2 days ago, and clipped it to the strap of her bag. Cincinnati Inquirer, Margaret Hadley, contributing writer, she picked up her notebook, the old one, from the banker's box, the one with her Northwestern shorthand, filling every page. She wasn't going to write in it tonight. She had the new one for that, but she put it in her bag anyway, the way you take something with you that you want to remember you were, once, before everything. She went downstairs. The cab shed ordered was already at the curb. She hadn't wanted to deal with parking. She hadn't wanted to arrive at anything tonight needing to manage logistics. She wanted both hands free. The driver glanced at her in the rear-view mirror as she got in, and then glanced again, not rudely, not with any particular intention, just the involuntary second look of someone who has registered that the person who just entered their vehicle is carrying themselves in a specific way. "Big night?" he said. Margaret settled the bag on her lap. "Something like that," she said. The cab pulled away from the curb, through the window. The maple in the backyard disappeared behind the neighbor's fence. The street opened up, Cincinnati at 7 in the evening, lit and moving, the river a dark suggestion in the distance, the air through the cracked window sharp and cold and tasting of the Ohio autumn she had grown up inside. She did not look back at the house. She opened her notebook to a clean page, and she wrote. In the shorthand only she could read one single line. Then she closed it. The gala was 8 minutes away. The Marriott on 5th Street had been dressed for the occasion. Navy and gold banners flanked the entrance. A step-and-repeat backdrop with the Cincinnati Inquirer masthead and the gala sponsors. Milner Group listed third from the left. Dennis' name nowhere on it, but present in the logic of it, the way certain men are present in rooms they technically haven't entered yet. A woman in a headset was managing a line of guests at the credential table with the focused efficiency of someone who had done this before and intended to do it again. Margaret gave her name. Hadley, she said. Margaret Hadley, press. The woman found it, clipped a lanyard to the credential, and handed it across without ceremony. Margaret put it on and walked in. The ballroom was already full, 300 people, maybe more, round tables draped in white linen, centerpieces of low white flowers, the warm underwater light of a room designed to make everyone look slightly better than they are. The noise was the noise of professional gatherings. Laughter calibrated to carry, conversations held at a volume that demonstrated confidence without requiring content. She moved through it the way she had always moved through rooms she was reporting in. Unhurried, peripheral, watching, she saw Dennis before he saw her. He was at the very important person table near the stage, the head table, as Head said. Though it wasn't quite the head table, it was adjacent to it, which was close enough for his purposes. He was mid-story, she could tell by his posture, the slight lean forward, the hand movement that meant Head reached the part where he was the most interesting person in it. The men around him were laughing. One of them was Milner. They all had the comfortable, incumbent look of people who have been important in the same room for a long time. She did not go toward him. She went toward the press riser along the left wall, where Loretta was already standing with a younger photographer, and a woman Margaret didn't recognize but who had the notebook and no-drink posture of someone filing tonight. Loretta saw her, said nothing, just nodded once, the way you nod at someone who is exactly where they're supposed to be. The program began at 7:30, awards for investigative reporting, community journalism, digital innovation, a video tribute to a retired editor who had spent 40 years at the Inquirer, and had the face of a man who had seen everything and remained, against the evidence, optimistic about most of it. And then the keynote, the MC, a local news anchor Margaret vaguely recognized, the kind of recognizable that comes from 30 years of appearing in people's living rooms at dinner time, stepped to the podium and said, "Our keynote speaker tonight needs very little introduction to anyone in this room. Pulitzer Prize for International Reporting, AP Bureau Chief, Nairobi, then Beirut, then Jakarta. He came home to Cincinnati 8 weeks ago after a decade abroad, and we are very glad to have him back. Please welcome Daniel Reeves." The applause was immediate and full. Margaret did not applaud. She held her notebook open and her pen ready, and she watched the left side of the stage where he would enter, and she kept her breathing even and low, the way she had learned to do in rooms where things were about to happen that she needed to see clearly. He walked out, taller than she remembered. Or maybe Shed compressed him in memory the way you compress things you carry for too long. Gray at the temples, real gray, not styled. He moved like a man accustomed to walking into rooms where the situation was already in progress and needed assessing. He shook the MC's hand, settled at the podium, and looked out at the room, and then, before he said a single word, his eyes moved across the crowd in the way all practiced speakers do, a quick sweep of the room to locate the geography of his audience, and stopped, not at her, not yet. A few degrees left of her, but close enough that she felt it. He spoke for 22 minutes. She wrote none of it down. She knew his voice, had carried the specific frequency of it for 28 years without meaning to, and she found that hearing it again was neither the devastation Shed braced for nor the nothing Shed hoped for. It was something more precise, the specific pain of recognizing something you had once understood completely and had spent a long time pretending you didn't miss. He spoke about what journalism cost, about the stories that stayed with you and the ones that should have but didn't, and what that difference told you about yourself. He spoke about coming home and finding the city changed and finding yourself changed, and the strange negotiation between those two facts. He did not look at the press riser again. She noticed after the formal program, the room exhaled into cocktail hour. She was filing her notes into the new notebook when she heard Dennis' voice, that particular elevated register he used at events, louder than necessary, performing for an audience of whoever was nearby. About 10 feet to her right. Not really my world, journalism, but the firm's been sponsoring this for 3 years, so, yeah. You know how it is. Good visibility. She did not look up, and then another voice, closer, quieter. "Excuse me, are you with the Inquirer?" She looked up. Daniel Reeves was standing 2 feet from her with a glass of water. Not wine, she noticed, water. And he was looking at her credential, not her face, her credential, Cincinnati Inquirer, Margaret Hadley. She watched the name land on him. 3 seconds. In those 3 seconds, she watched him read the name and process it and begin to dismiss it as coincidence, and then stop dismissing it. She watched the coincidence become a possibility, and the possibility become a fact. She watched him move through 28 years in the space between one breath and the next. He looked up, Maggie. It was not a question. It was not an exclamation. It was the sound of a man saying the one word that had apparently survived everything intact. "Daniel," she said. He opened his mouth, closed it. She had imagined this moment in the scattered, unbidden way you imagine things you tell yourself you're not thinking about. She had imagined she might feel rage or grief or the specific bitterness of a woman who had made the wrong choice and spent 3 decades knowing it. She had imagined she might feel nothing, which would have been its own kind of answer. What she felt was simpler and harder to name. She felt like herself, fully, finally, without apology. Herself. "I read the Arizona series," he said. His voice was careful, the voice of a man picking his way through something he wants very much not to damage. 4 years ago, I read it in Jakarta. I didn't know it was you. Hadley wasn't. He stopped. "You got married, I did. Pause, are you?" "I'm a contributing writer," she said, answering the question he hadn't asked and setting aside the one he had. "I'm covering the gala." He looked at her for a long moment. The ballroom noise moved around them. Laughter, glassware, the MC thanking the sponsors, Dennis' voice rising briefly above the general register to make a point about Q4 visibility. "The third piece," Daniel said quietly. In the Arizona series, The Woman with the Well, he paused. I've cited it. In lectures, in 3 different countries. Another pause. I didn't know. No, she said. You didn't. There was something in his face then, not pity. She would not have tolerated pity, but the particular expression of a person confronting the specific shape of what they left behind. What leaving had cost, not them, her, Maggie, I. It's Margaret, she said, quietly, not unkindly, simply correctly. It's been Margaret for a while now. It was Loretta who ended it. She appeared at Margaret's left shoulder with the purposeful arrival of someone who has been watching from a distance and has chosen her moment. She extended her hand to Daniel, professional, warm, the handshake of a woman who has her own relationship with power and doesn't need to perform it. Loretta Vance, deputy features editor, were running Margaret's first piece in Sunday's print edition. She said it the way you state facts, without drama, without announcement, simply as the condition of the world. It's the best long-form weave published in 2 years. Possibly longer. Daniel looked at Margaret. She did not look away. "ID expect nothing less," he said. And there was something in it, genuine, quiet, without the performance of graciousness, that she received without comment. She became aware, at the edge of her peripheral vision, of Dennis. He had drifted over, the way he drifted toward anything that appeared significant, magnetized by the gravity of recognized names. And he was standing 6 feet away, looking at Daniel Reeves with the expression of a man assembling a social calculation. "Dennis Calloway," he said, extending a hand. "Milner Group were one of the gala sponsors." He gestured vaguely toward Margaret. My wife, not her name, not her credential, not the byline 3 feet from his face on the lanyard around her neck. "My wife," Daniel shook his hand. Then he looked at the lanyard. Then he looked at Dennis with an expression that was perfectly pleasant and utterly opaque. "Your wife," he said, "is one of the finest journalists I've encountered in 30 years of this work. A beat. You must be very proud." Dennis blinked. The sentence had entered the room and rearranged it, quietly and without violence, the way a structural change rearranges a building. Nothing looked different. Everything was different. Dennis looked at Margaret. She met his eyes steadily. "I'm going to file my notes," she said. She picked up her notebook. She looked at Dennis one more time, not with anger, not with triumph, but with the clear, settled gaze of a woman who has finished carrying something heavy and has simply set it down.
"I'm not carrying this anymore, Dennis."
She said it the way you state a fact. Then she turned and walked back toward the press riser, and the ballroom noise closed in behind her, and she did not look back. 1 year later, the kitchen on a Tuesday morning in October, 6:47. The maple in the... No, different window now, different kitchen, a smaller one, in an apartment on Erie Avenue in Hyde Park, with a window above the sink that looked east and caught the morning light in a way that turned the counter gold for exactly 20 minutes before the angle shifted. She had learned the 20 minutes by accident and now arranged her mornings around it. She poured the coffee, black, a new mug, a plain white one, no dents, no history. On the counter beside the laptop, the old press badge. Margaret Hadley had it framed, finally small frame, nothing ornate. It sat between the window and the coffee maker and caught the morning light the same way the counter did. Her phone buzzed. Loretta, a message. 3 words and a link. "Congratulations, check this." She opened the link, the Inquirer, her byline at the top of the page. And beneath the headline, in the small text that listed awards and recognitions, Ohio Press Association Award, long-form journalism, Margaret Hadley, contributing writer. She read it once, set the phone down, picked up her coffee through the east window. Cincinnati was waking up, the particular slow gold of an October morning, the kind that makes the ordinary look briefly, accidentally beautiful. She thought about Daniel. They had met twice since the gala. Coffee, both times. Careful, honest, unhurried conversations between 2 people who understood they were not the same people who had stood at the edge of something once, and that this was not a tragedy, and that something could still be built on honest ground if both people chose to build slowly. She had not decided anything, neither had he. Some things didn't need to be decided yet. She thought about Dennis. He had moved into a condo in Blue Ash. She heard things, occasionally, through people they'd once shared. He was fine, continuing. The particular survival of men who have never had to question the conditions of their own comfort. She did not wish him harm. She did not wish him much of anything. She opened the laptop. The cursor blinked in the clean white field of a new document. She began to type, and that's where it'll leave you today. If Margaret's story stayed with you, if some part of it felt familiar, I want to hear from you. Have you ever stayed silent when you should have spoken? Have you ever made a trade that was never honored? Have you ever looked in a mirror and not quite recognized the person looking back, and then one day, finally, did? Tell me in the comments. Your words might be exactly what someone else needs to read today. If this story meant something to you, leave a like. It takes 1 second and it means everything to this channel. And if you're new here, subscribe and go check the playlist on your screen right now. There are stories waiting for you there that feel exactly like this one. I'll see you in the next one. Take care of yourself.